The desert stretched endlessly under the blazing sun. Golden dunes rising and falling like waves frozen in time. The river Nile cut through the land like a lifeline, its water feeding fields where farmers bent their backs in labor. Beyond the villages and farmland stood the temples and palaces of the pharaohs, rulers who were seen not only as kings, but also as divine beings chosen by the gods. Their words carried the weight of law, and their dreams shaped the destiny of the people. Life in the kingdom was filled with rituals. Every sunrise, priests climbed the tall steps of the temples to offer prayers to Ra, the sun god. Farmers gave thanks to Hapi, the spirit of the Nile, for the water that made their crops grow. Yet above all, the pharaoh stood at the center of faith and order. To serve him was to serve the gods. To protect his body after death was to protect the balance of the world. The people believed that death was not the end, it was a journey, a passage into another realm where the soul would continue to live. To prepare for this journey, the pharaohs ordered their tombs to be built long before their deaths. These were not simple resting places. They were grand vaults carved into stone, filled with treasures, food, and writings, all meant to serve the ruler in the afterlife. Every item placed inside had meaning. Gold was not only wealth, but also a symbol of eternity. Statues of servants and animals were believed to rise and serve the king once his soul awoke beyond the mortal world. The desert kept many secrets, and among the shifting sands, plans were whispered for hidden chambers. These vaults were unlike ordinary tombs. They were carved deeper, sealed tighter, and guarded more fiercely. The pharaohs feared not only time, but also men. Thieves and enemies always searched for gold. So priests and architects worked together to build traps and puzzles within the stone. A man could walk for hours inside and never find the true chamber, unless he knew the path marked by sacred signs. Among the workers who built these secret places were men like Nebu, a young stone cutter from a village near the river. His hands were rough from years of breaking limestone, and his body carried scars from falling rocks. He never saw the pharaoh with his own eyes. Yet he worked day and night for the promise that his labor would please the gods. Each time Nebu raised his hammer, he thought about how his effort was carving not only stone, but also history. The overseers were strict, often walking among the workers with staffs in hand, reminding them that the task was sacred. Priests in white robes walked behind them, chanting prayers as if their voices could bind the stone itself. The air inside the tunnels was heavy, filled with dust and sweat, yet the workers moved forward, believing they were building something that would outlast them. Nebu sometimes wondered about the treasures that would be placed inside. He had heard tales of golden chairs, painted masks, and jars filled with perfumes from distant lands. But he knew that to even dream of touching such objects was dangerous. The priests said that curses would fall upon anyone who dared to steal from the pharaoh. Whether these curses were real or not, the fear was strong enough to keep men silent. When the sun set, the workers returned to their huts near the valley. There, by small fires, they shared stories. One older man, named Pazer, often spoke of the journey of the soul. He told the younger men that when the heart of the pharaoh was weighed by the god Anubis, the truth of his life would be revealed. If his heart was lighter than a feather, he would pass into eternal peace. If not, he would be lost forever. These words filled the nights with mystery, making the workers feel that they were not only building a tomb, but also preparing the path for a soul's judgment. Far above, the palace shone with torches. The pharaoh himself, strong and proud, looked out across his land. He knew that one day his body would lie beneath the sands, but his spirit would live among the gods. His trust in his priests and builders was unshaken. He believed that the vaults being carved for him would guard his secrets for thousands of years. In the markets of the city, merchants sold beads, bread, and oils. Yet even their whispers of the hidden vaults spread. Some said the chambers were filled with rivers of gold. Others believed the walls were painted with maps of the stars. Nobody knew the truth, but the mystery itself added to the power of the pharaoh. Even common people, who would never see the inside of the tombs, spoke of them with awe. As weeks turned into years, the desert covered the traces of the workers. The entrance to each vault was hidden behind walls of stone and sealed with symbols known only to the priests. Nebu and his companions grew older, their hands shaping a secret world beneath the earth. When their work was done, they returned to their villages, leaving behind silent chambers that held the weight of eternity. The sands of Egypt waited patiently. Winds howled across the dunes, carrying whispers of voices long gone, deep within the earth. Torches had gone out, yet the carvings on the walls stood firm. Statues watched silently, their painted eyes unblinking. The treasures remained untouched. Sealed in darkness, to the living world above, these vaults were invisible. Yet to the pharaohs and the gods, they were doorways to forever. The people of the Nile continued their lives, farming, trading, and raising families. While beneath their feet the secrets of kings rested in silence, the desert became a shield. Hiding the chambers from the eyes of thieves and strangers, each vault was a promise, a sacred bond between the pharaoh and eternity. The sands of time moved slowly, but the vaults endured, waiting for the moment when their secrets would once again be so. The Valley of Kings lay quiet under the morning sun. From a distance, it looked like a barren land of cliffs and sand, but hidden within its heart. The sound of chisels echoed. Inside narrow passages, men worked with hammers and copper tools, striking stone again and again. Sparks jumped, dust rose, and the voices of workers carried in the dark tunnels. Among these men was Nebu, the stone cutter. He had grown stronger since the first days of labor. His arms carried the weight of endless strikes, and his eyes had adjusted to the dim light of oil lamps. Each mark he carved into the rock was part of a larger plan that he could not fully see. Only the master builders and the priests carried the complete map of the vault. The rest of the workers were told only what was necessary. The design of the vault was unlike ordinary tombs. It had many turns, false doors, and narrow halls that led nowhere. The builders called it a maze of shadows. If thieves tried to enter, they would become lost. Some halls were built to collapse under heavy weight. Others ended with walls painted to look like open passages. To the common eye, it was confusion. But to the priests, it was order, a system meant to protect the resting. Each day began before sunrise. The workers walked from their huts to the valley. Guards in leather armor stood at the entrances, counting every man. No one was allowed to leave early, and no stranger was allowed to enter. The pharaoh's secrets had to remain safe, and so the work site was guarded like a fortress. Inside, the overseer, a man named Rami, directed the labor. His voice was sharp, and he carried a staff to remind men of discipline. He did not strike often, but his presence was enough to keep the workers in line. By his side walked priests dressed in white robes, holding small scrolls and speaking prayers. They said the words of the gods guided the tools, and the blessings in their chants would keep the walls from falling. Nebu and his friend Senu worked side by side. Senu was younger, quick with his hands and quicker with his words. When the overseer was not near, he whispered stories to lighten the hours. He spoke of hidden chambers filled with shining gold, of jars of honey and wine that would never spoil, and of jeweled statues that looked alive in the torchlight. Nebu listened, though he often reminded his friend that such talk could bring punishment. The priests warned that speaking lightly of the pharaoh's afterlife was a dangerous thing still. The stories gave strength to tired arms as the hammers struck and the tunnels grew deeper. The men imagined what treasures would one day rest within the stone. For Nebu, it was not the gold that mattered, but the idea that his work would live on after him. He was a poor man, with little to leave his family, yet here in the valley, he was part of something that would endure for centuries. At night, when the workers returned to their huts, they gathered around fires. Food was simple bread, onions, and water from the river, but their talk was rich. Pazer, the elder, reminded them that the vault was more than stone. It was a passage for the pharaoh's soul. He described the journey after death, where the spirit faced the weighing of the heart. If the pharaoh's heart was pure, he would join the gods in eternal fields where crops grew without end. If not, his spirit would be lost. The workers listened with respect, for these stories gave meaning to their labor. The vault itself grew larger with each season. Long corridors were carved, chambers widened, and ceilings smoothed. On the walls, artists painted bright scenes of gods, animals, and boats sailing on the river of the afterlife. Colors of red, blue, and gold shone in the lamplight, turning the cold stone into a world of faith and power. Nebu sometimes paused from his work to watch the painters, marveling at how their hands brought life to empty walls. But the labor was dangerous. Rocks sometimes cracked and fell, crushing tools and injuring men. The tunnels grew hot, and the air became heavy with dust. More than once, Nebu saw a worker collapse from exhaustion. The overseer ordered them carried out, yet most returned the next day, for their families needed the food and shelter provided by the work. To leave the valley meant hunger. To stay meant hardship, but also honor. One evening, as the sun set behind the cliffs, Nebu walked with Senu to fetch water. The younger man lowered his voice and asked a question that had been troubling him. "Do you think the Pharaoh will ever see what we build? Will he know our names?" Nebu looked at the golden light fading over the desert. "He may not know our names," he said, "but the gods will. Every stone we carve is seen. Every strike of the hammer is remembered. We do not work for our own glory, but for something greater." Senu nodded, though he seemed unsure. The idea that their lives were spent in service of a tomb weighed heavily on him. Yet for Nebu, the thought was comforting. It gave purpose to the endless labor, a reason for the pain in his arms and the dust in his lungs. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. The vault grew deeper, the maze more complex. Secret passages were added, chambers sealed, and statues placed in silent rows. The priests recorded every turn on hidden scrolls, which they guarded with their lives. No single worker knew the full design, and so the secret was kept. The valley above remained quiet, the sounds of chisels and hammers echoing only within the stone. To any traveler passing by, it was just another barren place in the desert. Yet, beneath the surface, men carved shadows that would last forever. By the time Nebu's hair began to turn gray, he had worked on more than one vault. Each was different, each carried its own secrets. Yet all were built with the same purpose: to protect the final journey of the king. He often thought about how future generations might never know. The effort hidden under the sand, the workers. Names would fade, but the Pharaoh's name would shine. Still, he felt pride. The builders of shadows had left their mark on history. They had carved a world beneath the earth, one that held not only treasure, but also the hopes and fears of an entire people. The vaults were more than stone and gold. They were promises, sealed in silence, waiting for the day when the desert might reveal them again. The tunnel stretched deeper into the cliffs, and the air grew cooler as men carried torches through the narrow paths. The vault was no longer just a hollow space of stone. It was being filled with shapes, colors, and figures meant to guard them. Pharaoh's Rest. These were not living guards, but watchers made from stone, wood, and paint. The priests oversaw their placement with great care. They believed that when the Pharaoh's soul traveled into the next life, enemies and thieves would try to follow. To protect him, magical guardians had to be set within the chambers. Some were statues of jackals, standing tall with ears pointed, their black eyes staring through the darkness. Others were serpents carved in curling patterns along the walls, their fangs painted in red. There were also falcons with wings spread wide, as if ready to take flight. Each statue had meaning. The jackal represented Anubis, the god who watched over the dead. The falcon stood for Horus, the sky god who protected kings. The serpent was a sign of power, meant to strike at anyone who dared disturb the pharaoh. These images were not decoration. They were warnings, silent but strong, that this place was sacred and guarded. Nebu and the other workers often felt the weight of these painted eyes. When they carried stones or placed beams, they sometimes whispered short prayers, hoping the statues would not take offense. Even though they knew the figures were carved by human hands, they could not escape the feeling that something greater was watching them one day. Nebu and his friend Senu were ordered to move a heavy statue of a jackal into position. Near the entrance of a chamber, the statue was carved from black stone, smooth and shining in the lamplight. As they placed it, Senu wiped the sweat from his brow and whispered, It feels alive. Look at its eyes, Nebu. It sees us. Nebu frowned but did not disagree. The jackal's gaze was fixed forward, yet it seemed to look straight into their souls. He placed his hand gently on the statue and murmured a prayer for safe passage. The priests also painted curses on the walls, not in cruel words but in warnings of what would happen to those who broke the sanctity of the tomb. They wrote that sand would swallow intruders, that unseen hands would push them into darkness, that their names would be erased from memory for the people of the Nile. To lose one's name was to lose existence itself. It was a fate worse than death, for without a name, the soul could not live in the afterlife. The overseer Rami often reminded the workers that these spells were not for them, but for those who might come centuries later. Still, many of the men refused to touch the painted walls, fearing that even a careless brush of the hand might call down unseen forces. At night, when the workers returned to their huts, the stories grew even stronger. Pazer, the elder, told them of a legend. He said there was once a group of robbers who tried to break into a vault long ago. As they moved through the halls, their torches went out, though no wind was felt. They stumbled in the dark, calling to each other until silence fell. Days later, only empty sandals and broken tools were found near the entrance. No bodies were discovered, as if the desert had swallowed them whole. Senu laughed nervously at the story, but others crossed their arms and looked into the fire with unease. Nebu remained quiet. Deep in his heart, he believed that the statues and curses were not merely art. They carried power, born from faith and fear, strong enough to outlast generations. The watchers of the vault were not only statues. The priests designed hidden guardians as well. Heavy stones were placed above certain doors, ready to fall if the wrong path was taken. False steps were carved into the floor, leading to deep pits covered with sand and narrow corridors. The walls were built to collapse if pressed in the wrong way. To the priests, these were extensions of the divine watchers, traps that acted as hands of the gods, protecting the pharaoh from the greed of men. As the months passed, the chambers filled with more figures. There were small statues of servants, carved with baskets on their shoulders or jars in their hands. These were called shabdi. The priests said they would come to life in the afterworld, ready to serve the pharaoh as they had in life. To Nebu, these small figures were more unsettling than the great statues. Their faces were calm, almost human, as if they were only waiting for the right moment to move. When the workday ended, Nebu often sat outside the valley, looking at the cliffs glowing red in the sunset. He thought about the vault filling with silent watchers. Soon, when the pharaoh passed, treasures would be placed among them, and the chambers would be sealed forever. No man would walk those halls again. The statues would stand in silence, their duty unending. One evening, as the stars began to shine, Senu sat beside him. "Do you think the curses are real?" he asked quietly. Nebu did not answer at once. He thought of the jackal statue, the painted serpents, the falcons spreading their wings. He thought of the heavy stones hidden above the doors and the pits disguised beneath sand. Finally, he said, "Real or not, they will keep men away. Fear's as strong as stone." Senu nodded, though his eyes showed doubt. He was young, full of curiosity, and the thought of hidden chambers filled with treasures stirred his imagination. Nebu worried that his friend's hunger for stories might one day lead him too close to danger. Inside the vault, the work neared completion. The priests walked the halls with torches, their shadows stretching across painted walls. They recited prayers, blessing the statues and sealing power into the curses. They declared that the vault was guarded not only by stone, but by the gods themselves. The watchers stood in silence, their eyes glowing in the flicker of flame. The jackals faced the entrances, the serpents curled along the walls. The falcons looked down from above. The shabdi lined the shelves, ready to rise at their master's call. The vault had become more than a tomb. It was a kingdom of shadows, filled with silent guardians who would never rest. Nebu knew that his work would soon be done. He would return to his village, and others would place the treasures inside. Yet he also knew that the watchers would remain. Long after he was gone, long after even his name was forgotten. the statues would still be standing in the darkness, keeping their eternal watch over the secrets of the Pharaoh. The kingdom of the Nile had seen many rulers, each one building his own tomb, each one leaving behind treasures for the afterlife. Yet one pharaoh, named Menor, feared more than others that his final rest would not be safe. He had ruled with strength, but also with caution, for enemies surrounded his throne even in life. He knew that in death, greed would come for his treasures. He also knew that knowledge, if left unguarded, could be stolen by hands unworthy of it. Pharaoh Menor was not like others who only wished for gold and jewels in their vaults. He wanted his tomb to hold not just wealth, but also secrets that carried the wisdom of his reign. He had maps of the stars drawn by his scribes, scrolls that told of distant lands, and writings of victories and failures in battle. To Menor, these records were more precious than gold, for they told the story of a king's mind and the lessons of his time. One night, he called for his chief priest, Harun, and his master builder, Rami. They stood before him in the grand hall of the palace, where torches lit the tall columns. The air smelled of incense, and silence hung heavy between the three men. "I do not fear death," Menor said, his voice strong though his body had begun to weaken with age. "I fear that my story may be lost or stolen. My vault must protect not only my body, but my words. No thief must ever read them, and no enemy must ever claim them." Harun bowed deeply. "The gods hear your command, my king. We will place your words where only the worthy may find them." Rami placed his hand over his chest. "My workers will carve chambers no man can reach. The path will twist like a serpent, and false doors will lead intruders into traps. Only those guided by your blessing will know the way." The Pharaoh's eyes shone with fire. "Do it, and do it well. My soul must travel to the afterlife in peace, and my secrets must sleep in the sands until the right hands uncover them." So began the work on Menor's vault. Unlike the others, it was designed with even greater secrecy. There were outer halls, filled with painted scenes of gods, chambers for treasures of gold and statues of servants, and hidden paths that seemed to end only to turn back into themselves. But beyond these, deep in the heart of the stone, another chamber was made. This was the chamber Menor cared for most. It was smaller than the treasure hall, yet its walls were polished smooth. Shelves of carved stone were made to hold scrolls, sealed in jars. A great stone chest was placed in the center, its lid carved with the shape of the sun rising over the river. Inside this chest were the writings of the pharaoh himself, words of battles fought, treaties made, and dreams for the future of the kingdom. To guard this chamber, the priests placed their strongest spells. Harun and his followers painted sacred symbols across the entrance, symbols that called upon gods of protection. They burned incense and chanted through the night, binding the chamber with words meant to last as long as the stars above. They declared that any intruder would lose not only his life, but also his name, erased from memory forever. Rami and his builders placed hidden mechanisms in the walls. If the wrong stone was pressed, heavy slabs would fall from above, sealing the chamber in an instant. Some passages were made narrow, so that only one man could walk through at a time. False steps were carved into the floor, leading into pits that seemed to open suddenly from nowhere. The vault became a fortress of silence, a world where every shadow could hide danger. Nebu, the stone cutter, worked again among the crews chosen for this task. He felt the difference in the work. Other vaults were built with pride, but this one carried a weight of secrecy. The overseers spoke less, the priests guarded their scrolls more closely, and the workers were warned never to share what they had seen. Nebu hammered at stone until his arms ached. Yet in his heart he wondered what knowledge was being locked away. One evening, as he and Senu sat near their fire, Senu spoke in a hushed voice. "This vault feels different. It is as if we are building, not just for the afterlife, but for something hidden from our own people." Nebu nodded. "Perhaps some truths are too heavy for all men to know. The Pharaoh's wisdom may not be meant for every eye. We are workers, not judges. Our task is to build and to trust." Senu frowned but said no more. He respected Nebu, though his heart still burned with curiosity. When the vault neared completion, Pharaoh Menor himself came to see it, carried by servants. He entered the valley with guards around him. The workers bowed as he passed, for it was rare for a living king to walk near his future resting place. Menor's eyes, though old, were sharp as he studied the stone corridors. He paused before the chamber of his writings and placed his hand on the carved son of the chest. Here, he whispered, my thoughts will sleep. The sands will cover them, but time will not erase them. One day, perhaps, another will read them and learn. But until then, silence must be my guard. Harun and Rami bowed low, promising that his command would be fulfilled. The priests continued their prayers, and the builders finished their work with even greater care. The watchers of the vault were set in their places, the curses painted bright, the false doors sealed. At last, the Pharaoh's command was carried out. When the day came that Pharaoh Menor closed his eyes for the last time, the vault was ready. His body was wrapped in fine linen, his mask of gold placed over his face, and his treasures carried into the chambers. The scrolls and writings were placed in the secret chest, sealed with wax and bound with cords. The entrance was blocked with stones, and priests spoke their final words, calling on the gods to guard the king forever. The workers left, their footprints fading in the sand. The desert winds rose, covering the valley in silence. Deep within the earth, Pharaoh Menor lay in his vault, guarded by watchers, sealed by curses, and hidden behind mazes of stone. His secrets, his wisdom, and his treasures waited in darkness. Untouched and unseen, the command of the last pharaoh had been fulfilled. His rest was secure, and his final secrets were left to the care of time itself. The vault of Pharaoh Menor lay sealed beneath the cliffs, hidden from the eyes of men. Stones blocked the entrance, curses painted on walls waited in silence, and the watchers stood guard in eternal stillness. Above, the desert winds blew across the valley, carrying sand that drifted like waves upon the land. Seasons changed. Dynasties rose and fell, but the vault remained untouched. Years turned into decades, and decades into centuries. The workers who had carved the chambers grew old and died. Their children tilled the fields along the Nile, knowing nothing of the secret halls hidden under the cliffs. The names of the builders faded, remembered only in quiet whispers told by elders around fires. Even Nebu, the stone cutter who had given his strength to the vault, passed into memory. His story swallowed by time, the valley itself became a place of legend. Travelers who passed nearby spoke of hollow winds that echoed strangely among the rocks. Some believed the gods themselves walked there at night. Others claimed to see faint lights flicker among the cliffs, as if the spirits of kings still guarded their tombs. No one dared to linger long in the valley, for fear of curses that were said to strike down the curious, far away in the cities. New rulers claimed the throne. Some built their own tombs, while others sought to restore old temples. But the vault of Menor was forgotten. Sandstorms swept across the land, covering paths and hiding entrances. The desert became the greatest guardian, sealing the vault more strongly than any wall or spell. The river now flowed on, giving life to the people. Farmers planted and harvested, merchants traded, and priests prayed in temples. Children were born, grew, and grew old, never knowing that beneath their land, a king's secrets lay in darkness. The silence of centuries was deep and unbroken. Still, the vault kept its treasures safe. The gold remained in place. The scrolls lay untouched in their jars, and the chest of writings stood sealed in the heart of the chamber. The air inside was still, preserved by stone, as if time itself dared not step across the threshold. The watchers remained in their positions, their painted eyes unblinking, their stone forms untouched by dust. Legends grew stronger with time. Storytellers in the villages spoke of a great pharaoh buried with rivers of gold. They said his vault was guarded by curses that could blind a man or turn his heart to stone. Some tales said that statues came alive to chase intruders, while others claimed that entire chambers would collapse upon the greedy. The truth was unknown, but the stories were enough to keep most people away. Now and then, daring men attempted to test the legends. A few robbers came, carrying torches and tools. They searched the cliffs, tapping at stones and digging into the earth. But they found nothing. The desert had hidden the entrances to well. The thieves left with empty hands, cursing the sands, while the vault slept undisturbed. Centuries later, new kingdoms rose over Egypt. Foreign armies marched across the Nile, building their own rule over the land. They'd heard whispers of the lost tombs. Some dug in the valleys, searching for treasure, but most found only empty chambers already robbed in ages past. The vault of men remained untouched, protected by the silence that had guarded it for generations. The desert had become like a cloak, wrapping the secrets in layers of sand. Each storm covered the ground anew, erasing tracks, sealing cracks, and hiding all signs of human hands. The cliffs stood firm, but their faces changed with time, making even the sharpest eyes blind to hidden doors. In the great cities, time moved on. Temples crumbled, statues fell, and palaces turned to dust. New rulers built over the old, and new names replaced the old names on monuments. Yet the vault beneath the valley remained as it was, a frozen world of treasures and writings locked away in the earth. Inside, silence reigned. The torches had long since died, yet the paintings on the walls still glowed faintly with their colors. Scenes of gods guiding the pharaoh's soul remained fresh, as if painted yesterday. The statues of jackals stood tall, their eyes sharp. The falcons spread their wings, the serpents curled along the walls. The shabby still waited on their shelves, their carved faces calm. The chest of scrolls sat in the center of the secret chamber, guarding the words of a long-dead king. It was as if time itself bowed before the vault, unwilling to disturb its purpose. Outside, the desert people changed. New languages were spoken. New rulers came and went, but the valley remained the same. Shepherds led their flocks near the cliffs, but none entered the heart of the valley. Merchants passed on the edges, telling tales of buried kings. Even they felt that the place belonged not to men but to gods. Some nights, under the light of the moon, the valley seemed alive. The wind whistled through cracks in the stone, making sounds like voices calling in the dark. The stars shone brightly. Above, as if watching over the silent tombs, travelers passing by hurried their steps, whispering prayers as they went. None wished to test the power of curses said to last forever. Generations passed like grains of sand slipping through a hand. The world outside changed again and again, but the vault remained the same. Its silence was deep, its darkness unbroken. Pharaoh Menar's body rested where it had been placed, wrapped in linen, his golden mask shining faintly in the dark. His treasures surrounded him. His words lay sealed in the stone chest, and his watchers guarded him with eternal patience. The desert did its duty well. It covered, it protected, and it forgot. Yet in forgetting, it also preserved. What lay hidden in the sands would one day awaken curiosity again. For men have always sought the secrets of the past. For now, though, the silence held. The vault of Pharaoh Menor was untouched, unknown, and unbroken. It waited beneath the cliffs, a world apart, sealed in time. The centuries rolled on, but the watchers did not move. The curses did not fade, and the secrets of the last pharaoh remained safe in the shadows of eternity. The centuries of silence came to an end when new eyes turned toward the cliffs of the valley. Men from distant lands had begun to wander across Egypt, carrying strange tools, notebooks, and maps. They were not farmers or shepherds, nor were they robbers who sought only quick treasure. These were men who called themselves explorers, men who wished to uncover the mysteries of the past. One of them was a man named Marcus. He came from across the sea, from a land where ancient stories of Egypt had filled the minds of scholars and kings. Marcus had studied old writings and listened to tales from local guides. He believed that hidden beneath the sands of the valley lay a tomb untouched by time. The villagers warned him of curses, but Marcus only smiled. He did not fear curses. He feared only that time might have already destroyed the treasures. With him came a group of workers. They carried shovels, picks, and baskets for sand. The workers were uneasy, for they knew the legends of the valley. Some whispered prayers before lifting their tools. Others refused to go near the cliffs at all. But Marcus pressed on, guiding his men with firm words. At first, the desert gave nothing. Days passed as they dug along the base of the cliffs. Sand poured back into their holes. Stones broke their tools, and the sun burned their skin. Many wanted to give up, but Marcus's determination never wavered. He told them that patience would bring reward. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, a worker's pick struck something hard. The sound was different from stone. It rang like a hollow drum. The men gathered around and cleared away the sand. Soon they uncovered a carved block, its surface painted faintly with symbols. Marcus's eyes shone with excitement. He knew this was no common stone. It was an entrance. The workers pulled away more sand, revealing a sealed doorway. Hieroglyphs were carved across it, warning of punishment to those who dared to enter. Images of gods with fierce eyes stood guard. The villagers who watched from a distance shook their heads. Some turned and walked away, refusing to witness what they believed would bring misfortune. But Marcus was filled with joy. He ordered the workers to break the seal with hammers and levers. They loosened the stones until at last the door cracked open. A stale breath of air rushed out, air that had been trapped for centuries. The workers stepped back in fear, but Marcus stepped forward. With a torch in his hand, he entered the darkness. Inside, the passageway stretched before him, carved with images of pharaohs and gods. Dust lay thick on the floor, but the walls were clear. Marcus moved slowly, his torchlight dancing across the paintings. He felt as if he had stepped into another world, one untouched by time. Behind him, the workers followed nervously. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. The air was heavy, and every sound seemed louder than it should have been. The men whispered that the spirits were watching them. Marcus led them deeper until they reached a chamber. Statues stood along the walls, their faces calm yet stern. At the center lay jars, sealed with clay, their tops shaped like heads of animals. The workers gasped at the sight of gold glinting faintly in the torchlight. But Marcus was not satisfied. He believed the true chamber lay deeper. He ordered his men to search every wall. At last, one worker found a hidden door, its edges carefully joined to blend with the stone. Marcus ordered it to be opened, though the workers hesitated. They muttered about curses and begged him to leave. But Marcus's hunger for discovery was greater than their fear. The door was broken open, revealing a stairway leading downward. The air grew cooler as they descended. Their torches flickered, and some went out, as if the place itself resisted the light. The men grew restless, but Marcus urged them onward. At the bottom, they entered a vast hall. Here the walls were covered in brilliant paintings that still glow with color. Jackals, falcons, and serpents stretched across the stone. Rows of shabby figurines stood on shelves, watching silently, and at the far end stood a great chest, sealed with stone, its surface marked with royal signs. Marcus felt his breath catch. He knew this was no ordinary tomb. This was a vault of kings, untouched for centuries. His hands trembled as he reached toward the chest, but before he could open it, a strange sound echoed through the chamber. It was a low rumble, like distant thunder. The ground shook slightly, dust falling from the ceiling. The workers cried out and dropped their tools. Some ran back toward the stairway, shouting that the gods were angry. Marcus stood firm, though his heart raced. He told himself it was only loose stone. Yet he could not shake the feeling that the vault itself was warning him. Despite the fear, Marcus pressed on. He ordered the chest to be opened. The workers hesitated, but his sharp voice forced them to obey. Together they broke the seal, lifting the heavy lid. Inside lay scrolls wrapped in linen, and a mask of gold that gleamed even in the dim light. Marcus stared in awe. The mask was shaped like the face of a king, calm and eternal. The scrolls were covered in symbols, their ink still dark and clear. He realized he was holding the secrets of a lost pharaoh. But the workers could bear no more. They dropped their torches and fled up the stairs, their cries echoing through the halls. Marcus found himself alone with the treasures. For a moment, he felt triumph. He had achieved what no man had in centuries. But then the silence closed around him, heavy and deep. The flickering torchlight seemed to twist the painted eyes on the walls. The statues seemed to lean closer, their shadows stretching long across the floor. Marcus felt a chill crawl across his skin. He tried to steady his breath, but the air was thick. The rumble returned, louder this time, and he heard the sound of stone cracking. He realized the vault was not meant to be disturbed. With hurried steps, Marcus gathered what he could. He wrapped the golden mask in a scroll, holding them close. Then he turned and ran toward the stairs. Behind him, stones fell from the ceiling, striking the floor with sharp cracks. Dust filled the air, choking his lungs. When he reached the surface, the workers were already far away, fleeing across the sand. Marcus stumbled into the night, clutching the treasures to his chest. The stars shone cold above him, and the desert wind howled through the valley. The vault of Pharaoh Menor had been disturbed. Its silence was broken, its secrets pulled into the light of a new age. But the ancient watchers had not been defeated. Deep within the chambers, the statues stood firm, the curses remained carved into the walls. And the spirit of the Pharaoh watched. The valley had awakened, and it would not forget. When Marcus carried the golden mask and the scroll from the valley, he believed he had achieved a victory that would bring him honor. He thought his name would be remembered by kings and scholars. Yet, even as he walked away from the cliffs, a strange weight pressed on his heart. The desert wind followed him, carrying a sound that seemed almost like a whisper. The workers who had fled refused to return. They warned others in the village not to go near the valley again. Some even moved away, leaving their homes behind. They said the gods had awakened, and to remain close was dangerous. Marcus ignored their words. He brought the mask and scroll to his camp and studied them by lamplight. The mask's golden surface glowed in the fire's reflection. Its eyes, carved with great skill, seemed alive. The scroll was more difficult. Its writing was ancient, filled with symbols that only a few could understand. Yet Marcus traced the lines with trembling fingers. He believed the scroll held secrets greater than treasure. Night after night, he studied the scroll. Sleep escaped him, for his thoughts were filled with visions. He saw images of the Pharaoh's court, of priests chanting, of soldiers marching through the valley. He even dreamed of the burial itself, as if he had stood among the mourners. Each dream left him shaken, yet he pressed on. In time, he came to understand the scroll's warning. It spoke of a ruler who wished his secrets never to be broken. The Pharaoh had written that whoever disturbed his rest would carry a burden heavier than gold. His spirit would rise, not to strike with a weapon, but to unsettle the mind and cloud the heart. Marcus at first laughed at this. He told himself that words carved thousands of years ago could not harm him. Yet, as the days passed, he grew restless. His hands shook when he held the mask. The workers avoided him, whispering that he no longer looked like himself. His eyes seemed tired, his voice hollow, as though the desert had drained his strength. Despite his weakness, Marcus brought the treasures across the sea. In the great cities of his homeland, he displayed them to scholars and nobles. Crowds gathered to gaze upon the mask. Some admired its beauty, others feared its lifelike expression. The scroll was studied by men of knowledge, who argued over its meaning. Yet none could deny that it was a discovery beyond measure. For a short time, Marcus was praised. He was called brave and wise. He was invited to halls of kings and asked to speak of the valley. Yet each time he spoke, he felt a shiver inside. He knew he had not only opened a tomb, but had also broken a vow sealed by time. At night, his dreams grew darker. He saw the Pharaoh rise from his coffin, his eyes glowing like fire. He heard the sound of stone doors closing behind him. He felt sand covering his body as if the desert itself wished to bury him. He awoke sweating, unable to breathe. In his waking hours, he grew fearful of shadows. The statues in his room seemed to watch him. The golden mask, displayed proudly before others, appeared to change when he was alone. Its calm face sometimes looked stern, its eyes sharper, its mouth less forgiving. The people around him noticed his decline. They whispered that perhaps the scroll had been true. Some even begged him to return the treasures to the valley. But Marcus refused. He told them he had risked too much to give up now. He believed that if he learned more, the unease would vanish out instead. His mind weakened further. One night, during a storm, Marcus sat alone before the mask. The lightning outside lit up the room, and for an instant, he thought he saw the face move. Its eyes glared at him, and his mouth seemed to form words he could not understand. His courage failed, and he cried out. Servants rushed in, but when they looked, the mask was still. Only Marcus trembled. Days later, he vanished. His servants searched, but found no trace of him. Some claimed he had gone mad and fled. Others whispered that the spirit of the pharaoh had taken him. Only the mask and scroll remained, resting on a table, as if waiting for their master to return. News of Marcus's disappearance spread quickly. Some scholars declared it proof of the curse. Others dismissed it as nonsense, saying he had been overcome by illness. Yet the common people believed. They told stories of how the pharaoh's warning had come true, and how no man should disturb the dead. Years passed, and the treasures moved from one hand to another. They were displayed in grand halls and studied by many, but none who kept them. For long found peace. Some fell ill without reason, some quarreled with their friends, and some claimed to see shadows where none should be. Though the treasures were admired, they carried a fear that could not be shaken. Back in the valley, the tombs remained silent once more. The sand covered the broken doorway, hiding it from sight. Travelers passed through the land but dared not linger near the cliffs. The villagers still told their children the old warnings that the pharaohs did not rest lightly. The story of Marcus and the mask became part of the valley's long memory. Just as the priests of old had written, the spirit of the king had protected his secrets, though treasures were taken. Peace was never granted to those who stole them. Generations later, when new explorers came, they too heard the tale. Some laughed and entered the valley, while others stayed away. But all who listened remembered that Egypt's kings had built more than tombs. They had built warnings carved in stone, sealed with faith, and guarded by time itself. And so, the vaults of the pharaohs kept their power. Gold could be touched, scrolls could be read, but the spirit of the past could not be broken. The land remembered, and it whispered to all who dared to listen that the dead must never be disturbed. The valley remained both a place of wonder and of warning. Beneath the silent cliffs, the pharaohs still lay in their chambers, their secrets resting with them. Though men tried to take what was not theirs, the sands always rose again, covering the wounds left by human hands. Thus the story ended, not with triumph, but with a lesson. The ancient kings had spoken across time, and their voices still echoed in the wind. They reminded the living that greatness was not only in treasure, but in respect for what came before. And so the Valley of the Kings remained eternal, guarding both its gold and its warnings, waiting for the next soul bold enough or foolish enough to disturb the silence once more.